7 years of marriage, a 4-year-old daughter who stumbles over her words but melts my heart every time she says, "Daddy." I've faced darkness on the streets as a cop, but I never thought the shadows would creep into my home. For most of our marriage, I thought Rachel was happy. She wanted to be a stay-at-home mom for a while after Katie was born, and I supported her without question. Katie's speech problems worried me more than Rachel seemed to let on. She's bright, my little girl loves coloring and tells me all about her dreams, even if her sentences are halting and hard to follow. When Rachel suggested a speech therapist, I was relieved. Katie deserved the best chance to speak clearly and be understood. It started small. Rachel began dressing up more than usual for the appointments. At first, I thought she was just feeling good about herself. When she laughed more, smiled easily, I felt pride, maybe her dedication to Katie was paying off. But the laughter wasn't for me anymore. And it wasn't at home. I'm not a naturally suspicious man, but cops develop instincts. Small things build into patterns. The way she guarded her phone, how she flinched when I asked about the therapy sessions. "He's great with Katie," she said one evening. "Dr. Grant really knows how to engage with kids." Her voice was light, but her eyes darted. I tried to push the unease aside. But one evening, Katie tugged at my sleeve and said, "Dr. Grant is funny. Mommy laughs a lot with him." The pieces started clicking. Rachel was seeing more than just a speech therapist. I began watching closer, piecing together timelines. A new pattern emerged. Therapy appointments ran long. She didn't respond to my calls as quickly. And then there was the slip. "Dinner's ready," I called out as she returned late one evening. She froze, her coat still on. I noticed something, a faint scent on her scarf. Not her usual floral perfume, but a musky cologne. She muttered something about the appointment running late and hurried past me. That night, while she showered, I sat with her phone. Locked. She never used to lock it. My gut twisted. This was no longer suspicion, it was fact hiding in plain sight. I wasn't ready to confront her. Yet. Cops don't arrest until the case is solid, airtight. I decided to do what I've done for years on the force: observe, document, and uncover the truth. I installed a discreet GPS tracker on her car. Her whereabouts during therapy days became a labyrinth of coffee shops, a park on the other side of town, and, twice, a hotel parking lot. The betrayal was no longer a shadow, it was a monster breathing down my neck. The day of reckoning loomed closer as I pieced together Rachel's new reality. It wasn't just the therapy sessions. The tracker I'd planted on her car told a story I didn't want to read. One afternoon, as I sat in my patrol car between calls, the app pinged her location, a motel on the edge of town. My hand tightened around the phone. The confirmation wasn't a relief, it was a knife in the gut. That night, I watched her. Every movement, every word was scrutinized. She was too calm, her smiles too forced. Rachel, the woman who used to giggle uncontrollably at my terrible dad jokes, now felt like a stranger. I needed proof. Solid, undeniable proof. The opportunity came 2 weeks later. Rachel's routine hadn't changed, but the tension in our house could have cracked glass. She was headed to another therapy session. I decided to follow her, keeping a safe distance, careful not to spook her. Her car led me not to the speech therapy office, but to a small park nestled in a quiet neighborhood. She parked near the edge of the lot, away from the other cars. I watched as a man, tall, with neatly combed hair and glasses, approached her vehicle. Dr. Grant. He was younger than I expected, and he didn't look nervous as he leaned into her window and handed her a coffee. They spoke briefly before she got out, and they walked together toward the wooded trails. My pulse thundered in my ears. Every step they took into the trees felt like a mile away from me, from Katie, from the life we'd built together. I parked and followed at a distance, moving quietly, my training keeping me hidden. I didn't need to wait long. I found them on a secluded bench, his hand brushing her cheek as he leaned in. She kissed him back. Passionately. I turned away, heart racing, my chest hollow. I had seen enough. That evening, Rachel was chipper as she returned home. She hummed in the kitchen, cooked dinner, kissed Katie on the forehead as if the world hadn't shifted under my feet. I sat at the table, watching her movements, cataloging every detail of her performance. I needed a plan. Rachel and Dr. Grant didn't just betray me, they betrayed Katie. That was what fueled my rage. This wasn't just about me anymore, it was about protecting my little girl from the chaos that Rachel was dragging into her life. I couldn't confront her directly. Not yet. My anger needed direction, precision. Revenge, I decided, wouldn't be wild and unfocused. It would be cold, calculated, and absolute. The first step was Dr. Grant. A man who ruins families doesn't deserve to keep his clean, polished life. But this would take patience. I've staked out criminals for hours, sometimes days, and I'd do the same here. Justice wouldn't come from a badge or a courtroom. This time, it would come from me. Rachel left for another therapy session the next day, and I knew I had to make my move. Following her wasn't an option this time, I couldn't risk her catching on. Instead, I spent the morning doing what I've done 1,000 times as a cop, digging. This wasn't about laws or evidence anymore. This was personal, and Dr. Grant was the target. It didn't take long to uncover his vulnerabilities. He was careful on the surface, clean record, respected in his field, no prior complaints. But even the squeakiest lives have shadows. His social media profiles revealed a few telling details. He was an avid gardener, boasting about his plants and outdoor projects. A harmless hobby, or so it seemed. I took a day off from work, told Rachel I was covering a night shift. While she was out, I made a quick visit to the small private practice where Dr. Grant worked. In the alley behind his office, I opened my glove compartment, pulling out a small, carefully wrapped package, an ounce of weed, just enough to guarantee trouble. I'd confiscated it months ago during a bust, but the perp had skipped town, leaving the evidence unclaimed. This wasn't justice by the book. It was personal justice, a lesson in consequences. I scoped out his office for the perfect drop. His gardening shed, a small wooden structure behind the building, was unlocked. Too easy. Inside, I found a row of pots, soil bags, and tools meticulously arranged. I slipped the package into the pocket of his gardening apron and snapped a photo on my phone for insurance. By the time I was done, my hands were steady, my heartbeat slow. Years of training made this second nature. As I drove away, I felt a dark satisfaction simmering beneath the betrayal I carried every day. A week later, the trap sprung. Rachel came home from another session, and her expression was different. Nervous. She avoided my eyes as she moved around the kitchen, a crack in her otherwise perfect facade. I stayed silent, biding my time, letting her stew. The next morning, I made a quiet call to a detective I'd trained years ago, anonymously tipping him off to the presence of illegal substances at Dr. Grant's practice. He owed me a favor and didn't ask questions. Within hours, the raid made local news. Prominent speech therapist arrested on drug charges, the headline read. Rachel's phone buzzed non-stop that evening as she frantically texted. I pretended not to notice, but my satisfaction was hard to hide. It wasn't long before Rachel confronted me. I was in the garage, pretending to tinker with Katie's old bike, when she burst in, her face pale and panicked. David, she stammered, you have to help me. Dr. Grant's been arrested. This could ruin his life. He's innocent. He didn't do anything wrong. I looked at her, feigning confusion. What does that have to do with us? Tears welled in her eyes. He's a good man. He's helped Katie so much. I just need your help. There it was, the crack becoming a chasm. She wasn't even hiding it anymore. Her desperation reeked of guilt. I leaned against the workbench, letting the silence stretch. And why, I said finally, my voice cold, should I help him? Her face crumpled, and she whispered, because I love him. It was the confession I knew was coming, but it still hit like a fist to the gut. I straightened, keeping my composure, letting her see the disgust in my eyes. Then you can go to him. You can beg, plead, do whatever you need. But don't expect me to save your boyfriend. Rachel's sobs echoed in the garage as I walked past her, my voice low. I'll be in the house. With my daughter. This wasn't over. Not yet. Rachel was a wreck after our confrontation in the garage. She spent the next few days pacing, avoiding me, and anxiously scrolling through her phone. She wasn't sleeping much, I could tell from the dark circles under her eyes and the way her hands trembled when she thought I wasn't looking. I wanted to savor her unraveling, but Katie's bright little world was caught in the storm. She didn't understand why her mommy was distracted or why I was quieter at dinner. My daughter was the only thing grounding me, keeping the rage at bay. Every time I looked at her, I reminded myself, this wasn't just revenge. It was about protecting her future. Rachel finally broke the silence one evening. Katie was in bed, and I was nursing a whiskey in the living room, staring at the muted television. She sat across from me, her face pale and drawn. David, I know you're angry. Her voice cracked, but she pressed on. I made a mistake. A terrible mistake. But I'm begging you, please don't let this ruin everything. Not for Katie. Not for us. I stared at her, letting the seconds stretch into silence. Then I leaned forward, my voice low and measured. You didn't make a mistake, Rachel. You made choices. Every lie, every kiss, every stolen moment, those were choices. She flinched like I'd slapped her. I never meant to hurt you, she whispered. But you did, I said flatly. And now, you're trying to save him. Not us. Him. Her tears started again, but I was done being moved by them. She sobbed quietly, and for a moment, the woman I'd loved felt like a ghost sitting across from me. I thought about the first time I held her hand, the first time we laughed so hard we couldn't breathe. That version of her was gone, replaced by this stranger who had destroyed our life. Finally, she spoke, her voice trembling. I'll end it with him. I swear. Just, please don't destroy his life. I almost laughed at the absurdity of her plea. The life she was so desperate to save had already been shattered, and she didn't even know I was the one holding the hammer. The next morning, Rachel kept her promise. I watched from the corner of the kitchen as she stood in the driveway, her phone pressed to her ear. I couldn't hear the words, but the way her shoulders shook and her free hand gripped the car door told me enough. She was breaking it off with Dr. Grant. It wasn't enough. She thought she could close the door on her betrayal, that her tears could wash away what she'd done. But the damage was already done, and there was no fixing this. Later that evening, Rachel tried again to plead with me. We can rebuild, she said, her voice desperate. For Katie's sake. We can make this work. I shook my head, my resolve hard as stone. Katie will be fine. Because she'll have me. Her eyes widened as the meaning sank in. You can't take her from me, she said, her voice rising. I can and I will. I stood, towering over her, my anger finally breaking through. You were too busy sneaking around to think about what this would do to her. You don't get to hide behind her now. Rachel's tears flowed freely, but I was unmoved. I'd spent years comforting her, fixing her mistakes, being the man she relied on. But this time, I wasn't her shield. I was her reckoning. The following week, I started the custody process. Rachel's affair with Katie's therapist and Dr. Grant's subsequent arrest painted a damning picture. My lawyer assured me that the evidence I had would tip the scales in my favor. I moved into the guest room, avoiding Rachel whenever possible. The house was a battlefield, silent but charged with tension. Katie noticed, asking me one night why Mommy was sad. I struggled for words, eventually telling her, Mommy and Daddy are figuring some things out. But no matter what, I'll always be here for you. Her little arms wrapped around my neck, and I clung to her like a lifeline. Rachel's betrayal had torn my world apart, but Katie was my anchor. And soon, she would be the only piece of my shattered life that I carried forward. The custody hearing wasn't what Rachel expected. She arrived with her lawyer, clutching a folder that probably held glowing testimonials about her parenting. But the judge wasn't interested in character witnesses or her sudden promises of reform. The facts spoke louder than her tears. Her affair with Dr. Grant was undeniable, and the fallout from his arrest added weight to my case. I presented records of the therapy sessions that mysteriously overlapped with her appointments at motels, GPS logs, and a timeline that made her look more careless than cunning. Rachel tried to paint it as a momentary lapse, a mistake she regretted, but the judge wasn't moved. Katie's well-being was the priority. The judge awarded me primary custody, granting Rachel weekend visitation and stipulating that she attend counseling before she could petition for joint custody. I saw the devastation in her eyes as the gavel fell, but there was no satisfaction in it. Only exhaustion. Rachel confronted me in the parking lot after the hearing, her face blotchy and streaked with tears. "You've taken everything from me, David," she spat. "You've turned Katie against me." I stood firm, my voice cold and steady. "No, Rachel. You did this to yourself. I'm just making sure Katie doesn't pay the price for your choices." Her words faltered, and she turned away, her shoulders shaking. For a moment, I thought she might say something else, but she just got into her car and drove off. The house felt empty after Rachel moved out. The silence was almost oppressive, but it was also peaceful. Katie adjusted better than I expected, her resilience surprising me. She still asked about her mom, but her questions became less frequent, her attachment shifting toward our new routine. Every night, as I tucked her in, I promised her the same thing: "You'll always have me, no matter what." It was a promise I intended to keep. Rachel wasn't done trying to save Dr. Grant. A month after the custody hearing, she showed up unannounced, pleading with me to help clear his name. "You don't understand," she said, her voice frantic. "They're going to ruin his career. He didn't deserve this." I leaned against the doorway, my patience stretched thin. He didn't deserve this? He preyed on a married woman. He endangered his patients by dragging them into his mess. And you want me to help him? "Please, David," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "For me." I studied her for a long moment, wondering how I ever loved this woman. But Katie's face flashed in my mind, and I knew what I had to do. "I'll make one call," I said, my voice measured. "But this doesn't change anything between us. You're not coming back, Rachel. This is for Katie's sake, not yours." The charges against Dr. Grant were reduced after my intervention. I didn't do it for him, and I sure as hell didn't do it for Rachel. I did it to close the chapter cleanly, to keep the chaos from bleeding into Katie's life any further. He'd never work in his field again, that much was certain. But the spectacle ended quietly, and I was able to focus on rebuilding our lives. Rachel moved 2 towns over to be closer to Katie during her visitation weekends. I didn't fight it. She'd burned our bridges, but she was still Katie's mother. I wouldn't take that from my daughter, no matter how much I despised the woman Rachel had become. The first weekend Rachel took Katie, I paced the house like a caged animal, my phone in hand, waiting for something to go wrong. But when Katie came home Sunday night, she was happy, carrying a craft project she'd made with her mom. I hugged her tight, feeling a weight lift. Months passed. The anger faded into something quieter, resolve. I would protect Katie from now on, no matter what. Rachel became a figure on the periphery of my life, a reminder of what I'd endured and what I'd overcome. One evening, as Katie and I played a board game at the dining table, she looked up at me with her big, curious eyes. "Daddy, are we happy now?" she asked. I smiled and ruffled her hair. "Yeah, sweetheart. We're happy now."